What's the difference between a Class 1 and a Class 2 SRL? How do you know what you should use? By the end of this video, you'll understand what the difference is and when and why you should choose one over the other. My name is Ben, and this is the Lifting and Rigging channel. Today, I'm joined by Mazzella Fall Protection Division Manager Hillari Frost to help us understand which type of SRL we need. Should we buy a Class 1 or a Class 2? First off, Hillari, what is an SRL?
An SRL is a self-retracting lifeline. So it's utilized to connect a worker to a system.
What is the difference between a Class 1 and a Class 2 SRL?
The most simple explanation of that is a Class 1, it can only be used in overhead anchorage, whereas a Class 2 can be used overhead at dorsal D-ring or foot level tie-off.
So what does that mean? So you've got overhead anchorage at dorsal D-ring and below that, like what is a dorsal D-ring?
Dorsal, like a dolphin. Dorsal fin on your back, all D-rings should be placed if your harness is fitting properly. You can put your hand straight back and you can grab that D-ring.
So Class 2 can be at like shoulder height or it can be even on the ground?
Correct. Anywhere in that range or above. So anywhere from the top all the way down to the bottom.
Why does it matter if you are connecting overhead or at dorsal D-ring or below it?
You do not necessarily need as great of a fall clearance. Whereas when you are connected anywhere all the way down to your foot level, your fall clearance is almost 40 to 50% more than what it would be if you were tied off overhead. You have a vertical fall versus going over a side, going over an edge, and then additional fall after that.
Why not just always hook up above your head?
Well, it's not always possible, right? So you're on construction sites where there is nothing above your head. Everything is being built from the ground up. So you have to be tied off from a foot level and above.
And then what gives a Class 2 the ability to be hooked below along a leading edge compared to a Class 1?
Class 2s go through additional testing, and their wire rope is typically thicker or has been tested on abrasive edges and sharp edges to ensure that it doesn't snap, bird cage, or you have kinks in the line. They also have additional internal braking systems and typically an external energy pack on them to absorb some of that fall.
So both of these are cable SRLs. Is that the only option that's available for a Class 2 SRL?
Class 2 and a Class 1 SRL come both in cable and synthetic. So they use a different synthetic fiber that's reinforced to be able to handle sharp edges.
If you're shopping for an SRL, how do you know if you need a Class 1 or a Class 2?
So if you know that you're going to be connecting overhead and only overhead, then you're fine with a Class 1. If you're going to be at your D-ring or below your feet, or you're unsure of where your actual connection is going to be, Class 2 is the way to go. If you're in the construction industry, that a Class 2 is always where you want to lean towards, and that's because your conditions change as you continue to build on that structure. Where it may have had an overhead tie-off originally, you may have to go foot level when you go to the next level or the next level. So it's better to just keep yourself completely covered with the Class 2 versus having to have a Class 1 and then realizing that you need a Class 2.
How do you know if you already have an SRL, if it's Class 1 or Class 2? How can you tell the difference?
Every SRL is marked on the back with its class. So in this case, you're gonna see that it says Class 2, and in the same spot, you're gonna see that it's a Class 1. So there's always has to be a clear indication of class that's stamped onto the SRL.
And if you're inspecting your SRL before use, you should be checking your label and everything should be legible.
Exactly.
If it's not, you need to pull it out from service, right?
Absolutely.
So are there any common misconceptions that people make when they're shopping for SRLs?
The most common misconception is not having the knowledge to know that there's two different classes and not knowing what those two different classes are used for.
Based on what you said, I'm going to take a guess and say a Class 2 is more expensive than a Class 1.
Your Class 2 is probably between 30 and 50% more. I think that when you're starting to look into costs like that you also need to take in the factors that if you were to just purchase a Class 2, you could utilize it in almost any situation. Whereas if you were to purchase a Class 1 and then later find out you need to get a Class 2, you've now spent far more than you could have if you just got a Class 2.
Do the inspection requirements change based on Class 1 or Class 2?
There's no real difference in your inspection. It's just there's additional components.
What can happen if you're using a Class 1 when you should be using a Class 2?
One of the biggest things that we talk about when we start talking about Class 1 versus Class 2 is the fall clearance. On a Class 1, typically you need about 7 feet of fall clearance. On a Class 2, you need about 40% more than that. So you're talking almost 18 feet.
So these are just two examples of SRLs. If you're out shopping for SRLs, whether it's class 1 or class 2, what advice would you give them when they're shopping for an appropriate SRL?
If they're walking into a safety shop, they should talk to an expert within that safety shop. Let them know the hazards that they are up against. Let them know their distance from where they're going to be tied off to the ground so that they can ensure that not only do they get them the right length, but that they also get them the correct class that they need.
By now you should understand the difference between these two SRL types, and hopefully you have a good idea of which is best for you. If you still need help, contact Mazzella. Links below. Mazzella is here to help with all your fall protection needs, whether you need a custom engineered Lifeline system, personal fall protection equipment, a risk evaluation, or a Lifeline inspection. We're here to help and keep you safe. If you found this video useful, informative, entertaining, or you just feel like being friendly, then hit that like button so we can get this information out to everyone who needs it. If you have a question, drop it in the comments so we can get you an answer. Remember, safe rigging is smart rigging. My name is Ben. Stay safe out there.